Good afternoon. Welcome to the Virginia Bar Association's webinar on litigation prep with ChatGPT, the tricks and tips for the practitioner. The VBA is a leader in the AI education for lawyers. I'm Chris Spittler. I'm with the law firm Vanderpool, Frostick, Nashanian, and I am co-chair of the VBA's Committee on Small Firms and Solo Practitioners. The committee is a sponsor of this webinar today. I want to thank you for attending. It is important for all law firms and lawyers to understand how to use AI and how to use it properly. And I think that we're going to have an excellent presentation today on just how to do that. To really help small firms and solo practitioners, and frankly helpful for everybody, all law firms, our committee and the VBA created a model AI policy that's specifically designed for law firms. We have a connection to that, and I don't know if that we can put that in our chat, but you can get a copy of the model AI policy at bba.org-AI. I'd now like to introduce Gareth Bowen. Gareth is a second-year associate at Troxell, Leigh, and a member of the VBA's Young Lawyer Division and serves on its executive committee. He is also an articles editor at the opening statement, or for its opening statement. Gareth was instrumental in helping the Small Firms and Solo Practitioners Committee in working on our AI initiatives. He started doing tutorials for us at our committee meetings, and frankly, we found him so helpful for us that we wanted to be able to help other law firms begin and continue to using AI in their practice. And so we've done two different seminars. Our first one was last month, in which we did using AI, particularly for the transactional practice and transactional attorneys. Today, we're focusing on using AI in the litigation practice. So Gareth is going to cover using AI in some common areas, including drafting discovery requests and objections, drafting complaints, drafting the recitals and a settlement agreement based on the complaint, creating demand letters, and using AI as a general aid in writing. As we go along, please feel free to write your questions in the chat. I'll be checking those and presenting those to Gareth so that we can answer your questions as we go along. So now take it away, Gareth.
Thanks, Chris, for that wonderful intro. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming today. And for those of you who came to the transactional tutorial, I think you will find that today with the litigation practice tips and tricks that you get a little bit more creative, and you kind of, through using ChatGPT in your litigation practice, you kind of become more familiar with how ChatGPT sort of thinks, if you want to describe it that way. And I suppose we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen, my ChatGPT page that I have up. So we all are familiar with discovery and the tedium of it. So starting off, I'm going to give you some tips on how to draft discovery requests. And the way you want to approach ChatGPT with this is the same way you might approach your associate. You might approach, or even think about how you would create discovery requests. So of course, our foundational pleading is always the complaint in this, in drafting a discovery request. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk to ChatGPT. I'm going to say I represent, in this case, the defendant. And quick aside, we all understand the basic ethics rules and not putting in confidential information to ChatGPT. Even though litigation pleadings are technically public record, just to CYA, I do recommend putting your pleadings or your drafts into maybe a separate document where you have removed all of the identifying information. You might do find and replace, all the proper nouns with generic terms or otherwise. And you'll see in the samples I used today that I've stripped away the identifying information, even not just for the presentation, but that's just good practice in general. So anyway, back to the discovery request. So when you're thinking about what ChatGPT needs to draft discovery request, and later on I'll show you objections and otherwise, like a human, it needs all the information to work from. So I'm going to start off. I'm going to give ChatGPT the basic info. I'm going to say I represent the defendant in litigation, and just start there. Below is the text from the plaintiff's complaint. And I'm not going to give it any instructions yet, and I'll tell you why in a second. please, and I'm going to tell it to review it and let me know when you are done. So what I've done here is I've introduced, hey, I represent the defendant in litigation. That's the most basic premise here. I'm providing it the text from the plaintiff's complaint. And I'm not going to give it any tasks yet, because as I mentioned in the previous seminar, each user, in the most basic terms, is allocated a certain amount of processing power on the servers of ChatGPT. So if you try to overload it with a ton of information, a ton of requests, a ton of drafting requests, a ton of information all at once, it's not quite going to understand what it's supposed to do, and it's not going to do it very well. So you won't see this, but I'm going to go pull out, the text from the complaint. I'm just going to copy and paste the whole thing in here. There's a lot of information, but because I'm not providing it specific tasks yet, I'm kind of giving it the basic information it needs. So boom, text in, I just pasted the entire complaint, which is pretty long. It's a 56 paragraph complaint, not the most massive. I'm sure anyone in litigation has seen much longer complaints. It's all right. It's given some basic information here. All right, this is a basic summary of the complaint. For the viewers, the background of this one is trust and estate litigation involving, the defendant was accused of wasting the estate, basically misappropriating the assets. So there are various claims here. Okay, great. Now we're at the discovery phase, and that's the task we're trying to do today. So as a human, you would probably go through each paragraph of the complaint and think about what documents you need, what information you need from each one. You maybe do, and I always recommend this when you're using ChatGPT, you create your own draft of whatever your work product is. You create your own request for discovery. You create your own interrogatories to start off. And then you sit down, and you're like, maybe there's some more information I could get. I'm just not able to think of it off the top of my head. So I look at, maybe what other information would I need for let's go to this accusation, right? So upon information and belief, the following transactions were undertaken by the defendant, some transfers of money. So, okay, I'm just going to copy and paste this, and I'll say, I am working on discovery requests. And you think of some interrogatories from the defendant to the plaintiff for the following allegations from the complaint. So now I'm going to paste that in. And of course, something you'll notice when you're using ChatGPT is it kind of likes to lump compound discovery requests. It'll ask for, for example, state when and how you became aware of the transactions alleged in paragraph A through D. So you as a human lawyer, that's like, okay, that's a very baseline thing, but you can kind of take that, you can parse it out. These are all interrogatories, right? Here we go. Boom. It's just keeping on going. It's giving 10 of them. You can see how it breaks out the different type of information you need. As I said, this was a trust and estate litigation involving misappropriation of funds. So it actually breaks down like, hey, identify the documents that support your allegation, the basics for your allegation. Of course, you can cut out, and you don't have to use everything. We're not allowing ChatGPT to replace us as attorneys, but we're using it maybe as a starting point to help you draft these discovery requests or sort of supplement some thought that maybe you hadn't given to the assignment, right? How you first became aware of the transactions, and then boom, 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 it just keeps, and then it gets into the details even for each individual subparagraph. So the thought process here is I started out, I gave it the whole thing so it understands the gist, what are the causes of action, what is the entire fact pattern, right? And then I can break out individual paragraphs from it. And I recommend doing it this way rather than just dumping the whole thing in there and telling it to give you, a massive, your entire discovery set, right, off of the complaint. You kind of want to go through paragraph by paragraph because of that limitation and processing power that each user is given. And when you're using it as an attorney, you may not use it for every single paragraph, right? Maybe there's just one or two key paragraphs in the complaint where you say to yourself, man, I really need to like hone in on that. I need to figure out what documents they have to support that allegation, or vice versa if you're a plaintiff, and hone into that. And you can just focus your usage of ChatGPT for that. So then I may look at this and I say, hey, I noticed that you're kind of creating compounds here, ChatGPT. And, this is where you as an attorney could just make it yourself, or you could say some of those interrogatories you created are compounds and will likely be objected to. Please break out the compounded questions to distinct interrogatories. And then you can have it do, if this is a task that you want ChatGPT to do rather than doing it yourself, then you can have it do it. And here's a good little, if you've not used ChatGPT extensively, part of its surveying of its users is it'll give you two options for the responses it'll give, and you get to pick which one suits you. This is totally subjective, and the type of, it depends on the type of format you like for ChatGPT's responses. So I'm just gonna. This one's nice. I'm just off the top of my head when I'm thinking, hey, which one do I prefer from ChatGPT? I like that this one provides a heading for the topic of information that ChatGPT is trying to seek out with these interrogatories, and I'll pick that one. And of course, we know in Virginia we're limited to, I believe, 30 interrogatories, so you're not going to use all of these. You can probably do requests for discovery instead, and hone in on the information you need. It's still typing away. And frankly, that's probably a good sign. If ChatGPT is taking a nice long time to type it out, it's probably giving you a very thorough response. And it's still going. All right. I'm just going to pick that one. It's still going.
Gareth, while that's doing its job, can you explain why you use ChatGPT and some of the other options that are out there? So for people who are new.
I use ChatGPT specifically as sort of a writing assistant specifically. There are other AI offerings, but mainly ChatGPT is one I've used. Like, I think the one that a lot of people think of in the legal space is Co-Counsel by Westlaw, which provides you memorandums. So if you go in there and you type, hey, I need you to research the law for a case we're doing involves unity of land doctrine. So you say, hey, I need all the cases on unity of land doctrine. It can actually go and pull them, and it'll actually give you a sort of a memo to get you kickstarted and into researching the law yourself. I use ChatGPT because I feel like a lot of that research we kind of do on our own already because we need to understand it. It's not really helpful sometimes for it to just like dump a few cases on you that you would get if you did a search result, if you did a search yourself into the legal database. But ChatGPT is nice because it's generative. A lot of the other legal AI offerings so far aren't generative, as far as I know. I know for a fact that Lexis and Westlaw are all working on one, but I have personally not heard of others' experiences using them yet. And if anyone in the viewership here has experience with that, if it's already come out and I'm not aware of it, then feel free to put those experiences in. And I guess this is a note I made in the transactional seminar that I didn't make in this one, is that the way you should treat ChatGPT is sort of as a writing assistant, like a really smart high school, writing assistant. It's not going to replace your analytical thinking per se, and it's not going to be able to do document review the same way, some other softwares might. There's one, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but there are some AI softwares that provide sort of document review and organization. But I just use ChatGPT in particular because it's generative. It provides a unique service in that way, and I think it's the best when it comes to generative AI software. And yeah, that's the gist of that. So we've encountered a bug here where it's trying to type so many that, as I mentioned, it ran out of processing power. So it was just pumped out 44 interrogatories, and it ran out of processing power, so it just stopped typing them, right? And that sometimes is an issue where if you ask to do too much, it will actually try to do too much, and then it's unable to meet your requirements. And that's okay. That's where your experience using ChatGPT comes in, from playing around with it, seeing what type of workload it can actually handle. And as you can see, it ran out of responses here. But you can see it gave you 44 interrogatories even when it ran out of ideas, and you can pick and choose from them. You can put them in your own, request for discovery and go from there. All right, let's go on to objections, drafting objections. Objections is very mechanical as an attorney. We're all, I think Ben Leigh here describes it, objections as any attorney, all attorneys are enough of a wordsmith where you can object to any discovery requests and perhaps it can pass the sniff test. And I think ChatGPT is excellent at that, right? So I can just provide it an entire set of requests or sorry, interrogatories, and I'll just say, hey, draft me the objections for each one. And it's pretty good at giving you the good baseline sort of format for each one. You understanding the facts of the case, you can sort of dial them in, and you understanding what your local judges may find to be unreasonable, you can dial it in. But just to give you a little kickstart, sometimes you can have ChatGPT do the work for you. So, once again, you want to remind ChatGPT, it says, I represent the defendant and received these interrogatories. It doesn't really matter if you have typos, frankly. It'll fix them. Receive these interrogatories from the plaintiff. Please draft specific objections for each one. Now, I may think, okay, maybe I gave it a few too many. I gave it 13. Let's just give it 4 for now, and then I'll have it do the others on the second step, right? Boom. And while it's generating these specific objections, I wanted to note that I'm keeping this within the same chat, right? ChatGPT does develop a memory and sort of intuition from the information you've already fed it. And that even applies across chats. Right now, I only have one chat in my history because I like to clear it regularly. But I'm keeping this all within one chat because you can imagine ChatGPT sort of silos its information. So I have siloed like this case that I've been working on discovery for this matter. I would keep it all siloed to one chat because that way it actually recollects the prior information I gave it that's within this chat. Right. So I'm keeping it within here. It has the universe of the complaint to work off of. And having that universe of the complaint to work off of, it can draft the objections. And unfortunately, here it's citing perhaps falsely the federal rules of civil procedure. If you're in state court, of course, you're going to want to adjust that. You want to adjust that appropriately. But it gives you a great template here to go off of, right? I didn't give it the entire set of interrogatories from the plaintiff for the reason I mentioned above. I don't want to overload it. So it gave me interrogatory 1 through 4. You tailor these to your needs. I'll go ahead and give it the rest of them. I'll say do the same. And notice how when I'm talking to it, I'm not being overly formulaic. They call users of AI prompt engineers. I think that's a very nice way to say you're just talking to it. And I think talking to it sort of casually while also feeding it sufficient information to work off of, you can get good results. So I'll say do the same for the following interrogatories. And because ChatGPT has that intuition of the prior chat, when I say do the same, it understands that I'm saying do the same as in create specific objections for each of the interrogatories.
Gareth, we have a couple of questions. One was, how do you silo into place so you can access later?
It'll actually just save the chats, so you don't have to. If I create a new chat, I'll just do it right now. I'll wait till it finishes this, and then I'll just create a new chat. If I just create a new chat, then it'll silo the information to that other chat to that chat. Also, ChatGPT does have a feature. Let me see if I can pull it up. Where across chats, this is something that I can be frustrating, where it'll have a memory across various chats, which can be a problem because it can like taint or poison the responses it gives you from one chat to another. And you can see here, there's the memory option right there, right? ChatGPT will become more helpful as you chat, picking up on details and preferences to tailor its responses to you. I'm actually have it disabled for that reason, where if you have multiple chats open and you're working on different matters, you don't want to taint the responses in one with the information from a matter of another, right? So I would go into your personalization and disable the memory function. So that way it's not remembering one chat to another and therefore tainting the responses it gives. You could just imagine any sort of scenario where that can happen. There's also data controls that you want to turn off, improve the model for everyone. Of course, I doubt that your data is totally secure, which is why I keep the identifying information anonymous, and stripped away from the information I'm putting in. But little things like this can help keep ChatGPT more focused on our use case as attorneys, right? So
Gareth,
just to
also, are you using the free ChatGPT or the paid for subscription? And if so, what does it cost?
I use the paid for subscription, which is $20 a month. I started out using the free version with 3.5. And then at that time, ChatGPT 4 was only through the paid subscription. but I that may have changed now. I believe ChatGPT 4 is now available for free. And if you get the paid subscription, I believe you get unlimited, unlimited prompts that you can give it on any given day. You might be limited per day or per hour. I can't remember if you use the free version. And you also get the slightly upgraded ChatGPT version, which is 4.0. ChatGPT 4, they call it a legacy model. It was still pretty excellent. But if you get the paid version, you get the slightly better ChatGPT version, which is 4.0, which is like you can imagine 4.5, right? Originally it was 3.5 for free, then 4, now it's 4.0, which is really sort of a 4.5. All right. So anyway, so that is how you can do some discovery objections, which is very helpful. Imagine you get like 95 discovery requests for production of documents. That happens all the time in some aggressive litigation. It can become rather tedious to go through and draft the objections for each one. Of course, you want to always double check. But if you just imagine it from a productivity perspective, if it cuts out like 20% of the time needed to do the work, that benefits not only the client, benefits you. You might think, oh, well, I'm losing out on some billable hours. Well, some clients have budget constraints, so you have to match those and accommodate them. So it's not going to fully replace your workload, right? But it'll help maybe cut out a little bit of the time required for each project and a little bit of the tedium involved. All right, so sticking to the same sort of fact pattern, we're on to the deficiency letter stage. You submitted a bunch of requests for production of documents, and the opposing counsel is being difficult, and they're not giving you anything. That happens all the time. And you work with them. They're still kind of to meet your rules of Virginia Supreme Court requirements. You send out a deficiency letter. So I'm going to provide ChatGPT the information it needs to give me some deficiency letter comment. So I'm going to say, I submitted the following requests for production of documents to, plaintiff, and he objected to them. Various grounds, provided no documents. And of course, now I will say I'm realizing in my outline I forgot to include the objections from the plaintiff, but that's okay. If you were doing this on your own, then you would want to provide all the objections for each individual request that the plaintiff gave. So here we go. Please draft me deficiencies of the plaintiff for failing documents to each of the below requests. All right, so here are the discovery requests that defendant has sent plaintiff. Plaintiff has objected to each one on various grounds. Like I said, I don't have the objections in here, but you would want to include those if you were doing this on your own. But even though I don't have them in there, it's going to actually provide me draft deficiencies, which is amazing. This is a case where it's probably going to hallucinate the deficiencies themselves, right? It's hallucinating that the plaintiff objected on grounds of relevance, and which is really funny. But if you were to put in the actual objections themselves, it would actually address each one, which is great. Plaintiff's objections are overly broad and fail to address specific relevance. See, I didn't actually include the objection, so it's hallucinating that, 100% hallucinating that. But if you were to include the objections, it would do a much better job of accurately responding to each one. And that's where you as the user, as I commented early on, have to provide ChatGPT the information it needs to give you the response, just like a human, right? You can't assign your associate the task of drafting the deficiency letter without the objections. So you'd have to do the same with ChatGPT.
So Gareth, I think people were a little confused. What should they delete in the data controls? And how does ChatGPT understand which case you're talking about? And along the same lines was a question of, can he start a new session so we can see what happens to the old one? And I don't know, you may have things already built in order to do the presentation and show what's happening, but that was sort of some questions I just wanted to see if you could work in, and if not, then we can address it perhaps.
Yeah, no worries. So as I created a new chat. So you go up to the top left and you just click ChatGPT to create a new chat. So I've created a new chat. So this new chat, the way you want to think about it, it's like a new person almost. I've reset by creating a new chat. I've completely separated the previous chat where we're talking about that complaint, the discovery request, objections, etc. That is now in its own silo. And I've created a new chat where now ChatGPT is starting fresh, right? So if I'm starting a new task, I would always start a new chat so that it doesn't taint the responses I get. And I mentioned earlier with the data, to comment on the data control point, you want to make sure you go into the settings of ChatGPT and turn off the memory function. Because if I had the memory function on, then it would remember the information I put in that other chat and it would incorporate it into this chat, right? I don't want it to incorporate that information into the new chat because I'm working on a new matter. So by disabling the memory function, I have disabled that cross chat, I guess, tainting or like poisoning of responses, right? So I guess one way to think about it, if I had memory on right now, like I turned it on, right? This is on, this is off. And then if I had it on, then the memory function would be such that it remembers everything from the other chats and applies them into your new chat. By keeping it off, each new chat is distinct and there's no cross contamination. Can you guys let me know if that answers your question? And while we're getting those responses, I'll move on to the one that's perhaps a little fun with ChatGPT, which is where you can have it draft your causes of action. So I've created a new chat, which was good. That question was good timing because I'm going to work on a different substance matter, right? This is a different case, different fact pattern. I've created a totally new chat to erase those memories, so to speak, or just keep them separate from the previous chat. And to totally erase the memories, right? You just come over here and you can delete it. And if you delete it, then it deletes those memories for sure. You know, I have the memory function off, so in theory, this new chat shouldn't be tainted by that one. To be careful, to be safe, you can always just delete chats and like wipe out that recollection it had. So I'm going to go ahead and do that.
So while you're doing that, if you wanted it to remember the stuff in the past, you would just leave the memory on so that it was learning from everything in the past. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. And I find for our work as attorneys, you really don't want that because I mean, I've just kept it off always because I've seen how if you have two chats up with two different fact patterns, two different, substance matters, it'll start to populate the, one topic with another's information and it gets all mixed up. So you want to avoid that by just keeping it off, in my opinion. And if you ever go awry, you're doing a project with ChatGPT, alongside you. If you ever see it start to really go down a path that doesn't make sense, it starts really hallucinating, it starts giving you really bad responses. Sometimes it's better just to start over. You just wipe out the chat, you start over, you notice that it's giving really poor responses that don't make sense. You just start over and try new prompts to get it focused in on what you want. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just part of the learning process. It happens to me, while using it sometimes. And that's how it goes.
So if the memory is off, can it remember later in the same case? Or are you going to have to re-enter that information again? Like the example you gave of the complaint, the objections. Let's assume you can't finish that project at that time, you have to come back. Is there a way to save it, or how do you address that?
The way you address that is just by leaving that chat saved. Unfortunately, I did delete it for demonstration purposes, but if I did not delete that chat, I'll just create a new one right now. I'll just paste in I'll just create a new one and then create a separate one so you can see what I'm talking about. I represent plaintiff. Please review the. All right, so I'm pasting. This is a totally different matter, but anyway, I'm going to show you what I mean. So I've just created this one chat. I'm working on this complaint. That's great. And I say I'm done with this project, whatever it is. I just create a new chat and that's fine. Now I'm working on a separate project. If I want to return to that project, I just go and click on that old chat and whatever is within this chat, right, from top to bottom, it'll remember what's within this one chat, right? But if I start a new chat, it is now a distinct project with its own distinct memory within that project. Does that make sense? I hope it's not getting lost in translation here.
I think it's helpful. I think you just kind of have to get in and play with it a little bit in order to kind of work with it. At least that's been my experience. I think you really help getting started, but there's nothing like actually getting in there and playing with it.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And for the users asking that, if they're not familiar with the UI because they haven't tried it, that's probably why it's not quite making sense. Really, what all I'm doing is creating new chats. I'm just creating a new thread. It's like a thread, and imagine a forum. I'm making a new thread in a forum each time. I'm making a new thread for a new topic, new substance, new project, and each time I do that, by having memory off, I'm now having distinct silos. Each chat is its own distinct silo of memory for ChatGPT where they should not cross contaminate. But I think most users will find that if you're working on one project at a time and getting whatever you need to get done with ChatGPT, you're probably not returning to the old chats much. Maybe one exception is when you're doing transactional work and you're working on a contract thoroughly, then you might return to the same chat over and over again, but that's its own sort of case. All right.
Do you name them? I'm sorry, I know you have a lot of stuff
no
to get through, and I don't want to keep interrupting you, but do you name the individual chats? Let's suppose you have multiple chats up. Can you name them like
yeah. So right
drafting
here,
complaint or whatever?
right here, if you click on the little drop down, the options icon for each chat, you can rename it manually. You can rename it, I'll say complaint drafting, right? You can name it whatever you want. You can give it whatever proper noun you want, to reference each client as needed. But you can do it that way. You can manually name it, or sometimes AI will come up with its own name for the chat. Funny enough, I'm surprised it didn't for this one. It just labeled it new chat. But usually it'll come up with its own automated name, which you can manually go in and rename using that feature.
All right, I know you have a lot to cover, so I'm going to let you keep pressing on.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, these questions are always good so that I'm not just, breezing past things that people don't quite understand yet. So this one will be drafting causes of action. Now, for the basic causes of action we think about in the law, like breach of contract, unjust enrichment, maybe fraud, ChatGPT is pretty good about knowing the elements of those. So I'm going to show you how you can, based on the fact pattern, based on the background facts in the complaint, you can take those and just have ChatGPT draft the actual count for a breach of contract and then a breach, unjust enrichment claim. So I'll say, hello, chat. This is just, you don't have to say that. Hello, chat. I am working on a complaint and represent the plaintiff, obviously. Please review it. Let me know when you're done. But do not, and this is key, if I don't want it to go off on a long sort of response where it's providing edits or like reviewing, breaking down an outline of it, then I'm going to tell it explicitly, but do not provide any feedback yet. Edits yet. Boom. So I'm just telling it to review it. I want ChatGPT to be just reading it like you would tell a human, hey, review this complaint. Let me know when you're done, right? Just read it. So I've explicitly told it not to provide any feedback or edits. It responds saying, okay, I reviewed the complaint as requested. Let me know how you'd like to proceed. So here I'm going to have it. This is a basic construction contract dispute. Very simple. A subcontractor was not paid on time and has not been paid yet. So you're suing the general contractor for payment. So I'll say, please, now I'm just going to give it the request. Draft me a breach of contract count to this complaint. Boom. Exclamation point for fun. Boom. And what's great here, so while it's giving the response, I'll say you as the attorney did the sort of upfront heavy work of reviewing the documents, speaking with the client, getting the fact pattern down. You have drafted the fact pattern, which is usually the best way to do it, right? I don't think the AI is quite there yet where it can just replace us and all that client engagement. So you've done all the heavy loading. You've done all the background statement of facts, you've got the jurisdiction, whatever. And then, but you're just, all right, now I got to draft the prayers for relief, the counts, and it understands the basic elements for breach of contract. So it's going to give you each contract, right? Or each contract element. There's an enforceable contract. There was, in this case, performance by one party, non-performance or breach by another. And there are damages because there's an amount owed that hasn't been paid. There's, you can directly attribute the damages to the defendant. And sometimes it provides too much detail when you're incorporating by reference the above paragraphs. So you can just take that and streamline it as you'd like, but that has saved, a little bit of the tedium of drafting a breach of contract complaint. And then maybe a more, you always follow up a breach of contract sometimes with an unjust enrichment if the facts provide. So you will say, thank you. Now provide me a second count for unjust enrichment. And it'll take the same fact pattern and it'll provide you a second count for unjust enrichment. Now, these are the more basic examples of how you can have ChatGPT provide you a count to a complaint. The more fun ones are where Virginia statute provides you the actual elements for a cause of action. So we had a case once where there was a computer trespass matter. We're suing someone for basically hacking and stealing someone's account. And what you can do is you can actually give it the law. You can say, here is the Virginia statute for computer trespass. You paste it in, right? And then you paste in the facts that you created for the complaint. And then you say, based on these facts, based on that statute, draft me a account for this complaint for computer trespass. And it'll do the same thing here that it just did for breach of contract and for unjust enrichment. The reason why, so I didn't provide it, you'll notice how I didn't provide it for the elements for breach of contract or unjust enrichment in this example I'm giving you today. And that is because these are sort of, for AI even, these are sort of the most baseline, simple causes of action in the law, right? We all learned it in our contracts class. For something like computer trespass, which is a creation of statute, right, which AI may not have access to unless you provide it the statute, the text of the statute. You want to provide it that text of the statute and then provide it the facts and then have it draft a complaint based on that statute. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions?
No, I think that, very interesting and very helpful.
Yeah. It's amazing how fast it can work. And so now, okay, another part of litigation is, of course, settlement. As we all know, I think there's some crazy statistic where like 90-something% of cases all settle. So we're used to maybe having a form settlement agreement, but the recitals have to be tailored for each one. So I'm going to give you, this is an example where I'm siloing the information, right? So we have this case, a very simple construction, non-payment, breach of contract. This other case is a partition case, and I'm starting a new chat, right? I don't want to bring in this partition matter and the facts from it into the construction contract complaint chat in that thread, ChatGPT. So I've created a new chat, and I'll say, I am an attorney drafting a settlement agreement for a partition matter. Please draft me. And I'll just say, I'll do the same thing where I give it the complaint to review. Please review the below complaint. Let me know when you are done. And the reason why I'm saying, and let me know when you are done, is that's sort of a way of telling ChatGPT, I'm not asking it to give me like a summary or an outline of the complaint. I'm merely asking it to review the complaint. Just please review it and let me know when you are done, right? So the way you talk to a human, it's very casual the way you can speak with ChatGPT. All right, so this is a very basic partition matter. And look, even though I told it to not give any, I didn't say explicitly don't give me anything, it still decided to do it. ChatGPT has a mind of its own, as we all know, so it's deciding to review the whole thing. But that's okay. It just adds a few seconds till when you can type again. Oh, look, it complimented how well drafted the complaint is. Isn't that nice? Alrighty. So anyway, so you're on the settlement phase of this case, right? The parties just want to agree to the sale of the property, get it over with. You'll say, okay, great. Now, please draft me the recitals for a settlement agreement based on the facts from the complaint. And here it goes. And at the settlement phase is really where the parties get a little nitpicky about who is going to pay the attorney's fees to draft the settlement agreement, right? So if you're tasked with drafting the settlement agreement, this is a nice way to bring costs down for the parties. The recitals are honestly where a lot of the time is spent, probably just like reviewing all the facts, getting them all in, and then you can, there you go. It provides you a good start. Not, once again, nothing that ChatGPT really gives you is final. You always want to do your review, do your due diligence as the attorney, use your analytical brain that AI cannot replace, and you want to do your work. But this will cut out, a good, like I said, like 20, 15%. Who knows the exact number, but it'll increase productivity and save the client some money. So there you go. And notice how I've started creating new chats for each matter. That's good practice. Whenever you're working on a new subject or even a new assignment for the same client, you usually want to start a new chat GPT. So it's working only within the universe of information that you're giving it, right? For this one, I've gave, this is litigation, so I keep giving it complaints or discovery. But I just want the AI to work off of these universes of information in each chat. So the universe of information for the settlement recitals is this complaint. The universe of information for drafting the counts to a complaint is that complaint. So I'm just starting a new chat for each one, restricting what universe of information I give it, and you get better responses that way. You're not flooding it. You're not making it overthink. And a quick aside, you might have noticed that I have this separate chat here. This is called you can create your own GPT, so to speak. This is where you can create a chat GPT, like you can basically customize the engine a little bit to fit your needs. So I played around with it. And the way you do that is you go to explore GPTs and you can create one. And based on your needs, you're kind of going to tell it, what do you need what are you using ChatGPT for, et cetera, et cetera. And like, say, hey, I'm an attorney. I need you as a writing assistant. Maybe you're going to provide me some summarization of documents. Maybe you're going to provide me some writing assistance on pleadings or contracts. And you can plug all that information into here. And you can let it know the level of formality you want the responses to be in, all sorts of information. So that way, right now, I've been using the generic ChatGPT for all the examples I'm giving you today. If you think that you need a little bit more specificity in your responses, you need it to be more tailored to, whatever your preferences are for the type of responses ChatGPT gives. You can go and create your own GPT that way. I created one and I liked some alliteration for fun. Judicial jargon, jigsaw juggler. I have frankly found that the quality of responses are about the same as just using the generic ChatGPT, as long as you provide it that sort of preface. Hey, I am an attorney. You put that into your first message to ChatGPT. You say whatever you're representing, the defendant or plaintiff. It understands enough. Okay, this guy, however AI thinks, it understands that you're an attorney using it in this sort of this use case. So it'll provide responses that match that sufficiently enough where you don't really have to create your own ChatGPT. But if you'd like to, that option is there. Here's a good example, right? It says, how does this law apply to my case? Those are just generic responses it's giving. That is very helpful where you can go into LexisNexis. You can give it a fact pattern, right? You can give it a case, like a case excerpt, and then you can put those two in and then say, hey, does this case excerpt apply to this fact pattern? And see what kind of response it gives you. And then, so the next task might kind of touch on that a little bit. Let's see. Let's get into some general writing assistance. This is probably, in my opinion, this is the greatest use case for ChatGPT. This is where you use ChatGPT for what it's meant for, which is a writing assistant, because ChatGPT ultimately is a language model. That is what it is. It just generates words based on what words sound correct after the preceding word. So I'm going to tell it I am working on a motion. Please find the argument section below. So that's it. I'm not going to ask it to do anything yet. All right. So I just give it the whole thing, the whole structure of the argument section of this. So this is a demur, it looks like. Yes, this is a demur for a real estate contract where they're saying it's unenforceable. We're saying it's enforceable. All right. So now it's giving a little review of it. So what is the task I have at hand? Well, I'm thinking, okay, I spent a lot of time. I did my first draft, right? As I said earlier, you, the attorney, you do your first draft of these of these motions, of the discovery, etc. But you're thinking to yourself, man, there's like some parts here and there where I could tweak to just make it just a little bit better, right? Like how do I, if I'm using a lot of quotes, for example, maybe I can consolidate those quotes into a simple sentence. So here we go. So here's a good example. So in my draft, I have a large quote here about conditional contracts, the enforceability of them. I'll say, okay, it's read the whole thing and understands the context that this paragraph is in. And I'll say, I used a large block quote to explain the law in the below paragraph. Can you please make that paragraph each you read by summarizing the law in the block quote rather than using an entire quote, using a larger quote. All right, but I do notice here, okay, this is a little tip. Because I used a block quote format in the motion, right, where I brought the indents on each side by 0.5 inch. I didn't use quotation marks around the quote. ChatGPT may not know which part of this is the quote, so I'm going to go ahead and plug some quotes in here manually, even though they're not in my pleading or my motion or my demur, excuse me, my demur, even though they're not in my demur draft in Word, for ChatGPT, I'm putting in quotation marks just to make clear to ChatGPT that it knows, hey, that's a long quote right there. All right. And this is where the writing assistant side comes in. On my first draft version of this demur, I'm like, hey, this long quote looks good. Maybe after reading through it one or two more times, I think to myself, having a large block quote right there doesn't look great. So here you go. It actually consolidates that long quote into a nice, concise statement of the rule, right? You can compare this long paragraph 5 with this condensed 2-sentence version of it. And you might say to yourself, well, I'm a good enough writer. I've heard this from a lot of attorneys. I'm a good enough writer. I really don't need any help from AI. And I know a lot of attorneys are very good writers. That is true. But it helps to have a second set of eyes sometimes. You think you're a really good writer, and maybe if you remove yourself from the writer's seat and you read it from a completely neutral third party seat, you might say to yourself, hey, maybe there's some parts here and there that aren't as clear as I thought. And ChatGPT can really help with that. Just help make a complex idea simpler, make a long quote here into a short sentence. That's really where the best use comes in. What if another example? What if I've drafted this, I'm reading through it. I think, hey, my headings for the argument section, they don't look very good. I mean, frankly, these are fine for the case at hand, but I'll say, hey, I wish I could do a little better with my section heading for section 1 of my argument. So I can just take that section 1 and paste it in. These are just examples of how you can use it. Please make the section header a better and an introduction to the section. That's not the most articulate, the most eloquent way to say it, but ChatGPT will get the idea. Please make the section header better, an introduction to the section. And it gives you a new draft of it. And unfortunately, it's going to go forth. This happens all the time where it starts running down this path of just like rewriting the whole thing. You'll get used to that. But you can just ignore this and say, okay, as the attorney, I'm just going to take this part, right? This is all I needed from this entire response. I'll take that and put it into my work product. I'm not going to take, the rest of this. All right. Another good example. We all want to, in some of our demurs, our motions, etc., we want to have a good introduction to it. So the judge, we know a lot of judges, they may not read all the pleading. That's a reality we face. So then you want a really good introduction or summary section for your pleading, right? So you can have ChatGPT draft that for you. And you want to keep it very surface level, introductory paragraph, or a summary paragraph that summarizes the entire argument section. All right. So I paste the whole thing again. Why? Because I want ChatGPT to know I haven't actually changed. It might think if I didn't say, excuse me, if I didn't repaste the entire argument section in again, it might think that I implemented this. And this is where a little contamination topic comes up. But if you were to not paste the argument section again, as I did, then it may think that whatever changes it suggested were already incorporated into the work product, and it'll incorporate those changes that the AI made that you didn't make to your work product into its response. So by pasting the entire argument section again, I have once again given it the universe of information it needs to provide an accurate response. Right. So
Gareth,
this
what steps do you use to import the letter, the pleading, or the document you receive from opposing counsel to be reviewed by ChatGPT?
So ChatGPT, you can actually upload PDFs to it, and as long as it's optical, there's OCI, I think is the acronym, where it can read the characters in the PDF. Then it can read them. It can provide you a summary. To be safe and to make sure you get the most accurate responses, just out of due to a formatting issue with the PDF, I always recommend, if you can, making a new Word document from the PDF, whether that's converting the PDF to Word, and then the next step would be to clean it up, all the formatting issues that may come from that. But ideally, they have a nice, clean PDF that's, I think, once again, I think the acronym is OCI, where you can, how with some PDFs you can copy and paste the text from them and it's very clean. And some PDFs are totally unreadable where you can't copy and paste text from them. So with whatever PDFs you put in the ChatGPT, you want to ensure that the PDF is like the characters are recognized and identifiable. Um, this is now off the topic of AI, but if you use Adobe PDF, there is actually a function called enhanced scans where it'll recognize the characters in the PDF. And if you're going to put a PDF into ChatGPT, I always recommend enhancing the scan through Adobe before you plug it in. That's also just helpful from a general practice perspective, because then you can use the Control F and find word function, right? So that's how you can have it scan and read opposing parties' pleadings. Ideally, you get a Word version from them. That doesn't always happen, obviously. And by pasting in the exact text, it's going to give you the most accurate response. Sometimes formatting issues on PDFs can be pretty severe when they're converted to Word. So that's just a basic sort of challenge that needs to be overcome whenever you're doing
So
your work.
you're just using the basic functions of Word, copy and paste function from the Word document, and then using that same function in GPT, like Control V or
Control C, Control V.
yeah.
That's exactly right. After I've stripped away identifying information, same. That's the basic concept. You can, of course, just upload Word documents into it, but I find I like to know for certain like what information the AI is pulling from, and by pasting that information into the chat itself, you are ensuring that the information it is working from is the information you are giving it, right? And so for example, I can say, okay, well, and also if you want to redline things, sometimes it's nice to just have the text in the chat itself, and then you can have it redline that, right? So I'll say, help me redraft my intro. Um, and then, okay, so I'm just going to give it that first step. Help me redraft my intro. And it's redrafting it. Okay, the court should sustain the demur, basically the same. And then I'm reading this. This is a decently large block of text where, it's not like in Word where you have track changes. It's easy to identify what was changed. You can ask it to redline it. So please provide me redline so I can easily identify. Now, it's not going to literally provide you a Word redline, right? But it will provide you strike throughs and usually bolding. So you can see here are some bolds, can and should. And of course, you want to go, hey, did it actually? Because once again, ChatGPT can hallucinate. So I've had it where I've asked it to redline and it'll bold things as if it inserted them, where it actually just took exactly what I said and copy and pasted it and then pretended it redlined it. So you can manually go in and say, okay, there's a bold here indicating it inserted that. I can see it actually did make that change based on reviewing mine manually. That is a one feature that ChatGPT is lacking, and that is once again because it's just a language model that's really, really advanced, but it still lacks in some tasks like that. And a good example I've heard of that is, at least in the past, if you were to ask ChatGPT like to do basic math, it just simply couldn't do it. If you ask it what 2 + 2 equals, it wouldn't know because it's just a language model. It doesn't do math. I know that that has changed. It's become a lot better and intuitive when it comes to those sort of tasks, but in the past it couldn't do that. So for tasks like a red line, it's not the best. Really, the best task is creating just words, based on facts you give it, or editing or whatever you're providing it. So as you can see, I asked it to provide a simple rewrite of this portion of my memo, and it did a great job. Provided a nice, succinct version of that. Right.
Gareth, have you tried having ChatGPT conform sites to Blue Book sites?
I have not, and I don't know if I would trust it to do that. We can try one right now, actually. Let's take a random site. Let's take this site right here. Okay. So let's see. Does this citation conform to, and I'm just going to paste this one in. Mostly correct, but can be cited. Let's see. Now, this is an example where when you're copying and pasting text from a word into ChatGPT, it doesn't paste over the italicization or other formatting things like bolding. So, but here it actually identified, hey, case name should be italicized. It identified that associates may be able to be shortened, abbreviated. Let's see where it changed that. I think this is an example where it actually, oh yeah, it gave a correction. Someone with Blue Book in front of them would have to double check, but is the correct abbreviation for associates with an S at the end or without? I don't know. And I don't know if ChatGPT is actually totally accurate on that, but if someone has a Blue Book, they can check. So maybe it does provide an excellent Blue Book citation, service. If anyone has double checked that, that'd be great. I'm very curious about it. All right. All right. So same thing. I'm going to take this and make a conclusion paragraph again. This is where, that's probably where, once again, as a writing assistant, it does a great job. Just like I made an introduction, you can make a conclusion. And yeah, I want you guys to notice something here where it actually is importing the writing style I already used, which is interesting. So sometimes ChatGPT, if you ask it to provide an introduction or a summary, it does a lot of telling rather than showing, which is not good. It'll say the court should sustain, if you ask to do an introduction, it'll say this demur is about XYZ and the court should sustain it because XYZ. Sometimes you don't want to have all that telling rather than showing. And you have to sometimes guide ChatGPT. I was actually hoping it would do it today, but it's not, right? This is an example of like the unpredictability of ChatGPT. I was hoping it would provide some of that poor sort of writing to you, so then you can see how I adjust it. It's actually doing a good job right now, but I'll nevertheless show that lesson where it gave me this work product. It's not quite, just, maybe it's fine. I'm not going to spend the time right now reviewing the substance of it, but maybe I want to be a little bit better. So I'll say, please simple down the complex ideas in that conclusion. And then you can even give it more instruction. I'll say, write it at an 11th grade level. Right. I really wanted to dumb down the complex ideas, quote unquote, complex ideas in that conclusion paragraph. All right. It did do some adjustment here, but it did actually simple the language down a little bit, which is nice. You will notice it uses contractions all the time. I don't know why the programmers we are allergic to contractions for good reason. They're not very formal in the law. It will always default to using contractions, even if you tell it not to, and it will always default to single spacing paragraphs, even if you tell it not to. So those are small editorializing that you have to do on the back end as the attorney when you're taking this response and putting it to your own work product.
Hey, Gareth, it looks like we're out of time. I did see
Oh,
real quick one last question that says, can you create deposition questions? And I don't know that we have time to do that, but I think
oh,
the answer is yes. But if you could just try to summarize perhaps in words real quick.
yes, certainly. The same way I created interrogatories, or I didn't do requests for production of documents, but the same way you create discovery responses from it by providing it the universe of information, right? You provide the complaint. Maybe for creating deposition questions, you need to provide maybe like your own summary of documents that you've received to cross-examine or to impeach someone you're deposing. The same way you create those discovery requests, you would also create deposition questions. Maybe if you're thinking about cross-examining or direct examining someone, you can try to have it provide some input for some good questions. Although we all know that in good litigation practice, you don't want to just read off questions that you have per se. So you can ask yourself, like, how helpful is that? But maybe as an outline, if you take whatever your universe of facts are, you put it in, you have it create a good outline for you for direct cross-examination. It is good with that. I've had it develop my oral arguments or help develop. I always create my first draft and then plug in AI, help sort of streamline my outlines for some oral arguments I've done for motions or otherwise. And it's really helpful for that. Any other questions before we close out?
I think we're at the end, and I guess let me just finish with one quick question is, it sounds like you are so knowledgeable about how to do the prompts and how to work with this. Can you explain about sort of how new you are to this and how you've gotten to where you are at this point?
I've used it for, geez, a couple of years now. And since about 2022, like late winter probably. And the way I got better at it, and it seems like it's really complex, but once you use it more and more, you really gain an intuition for it. And the way I would describe it is you're talking to it like you're talking to a human, where you just become more intuitive at giving it the information it needs, sort of providing your prompts in a way that you provide to a human almost. So like the Blue Book citation is a good example. Like if you were asking a person, hey, does this conform to Blue Book citation standards? You would just ask them that and provide them the citation. If I let's go up to the example where I had it streamline a block quote, right? So the same way I would tell a human to, if I had a human, if imagine a human writing assistant, if I had a human writing assistant and I want them to make this paragraph a little bit more clear, I would say, here's the premise. I use a large block quote. You tell the same way you tell a human. Can you please make that paragraph easier to read by summarizing the law in the block quote? It's just the same way you talk to a human. And sometimes you're not going to get responses you want, and that's okay. That's where you maybe start over, give it a new universe of information, new prompts, and you try again, and you'll become quite excellent at it, I think.
Well, Gareth, thank you so much. As always, it is so helpful when you're actually walking us through the way to use AI, and having done it for the litigation this time and transaction in the past. So thank you very much. I do want to remind everybody that the copy of this or a recording of this will be available on the Virginia Bar Association's YouTube channel. I understand that's up on the chat, so please take a look at that. I want to thank the VBA staff and everybody for putting this on. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Gareth, and I hope everybody has a good afternoon.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody, for coming.